This is my book. This is also the first time I am seeing it in print. I wrote this book last year. I started it in July and I finished it in October. It is now January, which means that I've taken about 2 months away from the project, and I am finally ready to revisit it. And the way that I'm going to be doing that is by reading through the entirety of my first draft. It's not the greatest piece of writing. It's also not the longest piece of writing. It is only about 63,000 words long, if I remember correctly. This is not the first book I've ever written. I've actually written 3 completely different drafts of a different novel project. That one, however, I wrote when I was a teenager in high school. In this video, I will be sharing the most I have ever shared about this project. Hi, hello, me from the future is interrupting me from this morning to tell you what this book is about. I should be an expert because at this point I've spent my entire day thinking about this book and reading this book. So I have prepared for you a very wonderful, very simple Google Slides presentation, which if you've seen my first ever writing vlog on this channel that I posted when I was 14 years old, you would know that I have done this before. Welcome to a quick and simple guide to Project Magnolia, except this is only for the first draft. I am telling you right now that things I'm about to tell you are going to change. First off, I have had this project idea since 2020, but it took me until July of 2025 to finally begin drafting it. What that means is that this book has gone through many, many, many different changes. It started off as a dark academia story, and eventually it evolved into something completely different. Currently, I would classify it as horror and not general fiction, but that also might change in the future, but that's also something I can think about more if one day I'm actually looking to publish this story. The protagonist is a young woman named Anita. She's the only character that you get to know about. The most important thing to know about Anita is that her mom has owned a hotel ever since Anita was a kid, and that Anita grew up at that hotel, and that now that she's an adult, she is basically running the hotel alongside her mom. Her mom is also going to be a very important character, but I neglected her very badly in draft 1. Sorry, Heather. Lastly, the setting. Currently, it is a coastal small town on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, which, in case you can't tell by my sweater, is where I live. It's where I'm from. Not Vancouver Island, but BC. This story is 100% going to take place in this province. What I don't know is whether or not it's going to actually take place on Vancouver Island, which, if you don't know, is a real place, or if it's going to take place on a fictional island, or secret third thing, if it's gonna not even be a coastal small town, and instead if it's gonna be like more of a mountain town that you would find in the Kootenays or the interior, which probably means nothing to people. But the setting is inspired by places that I have been to myself, but it is not meant to be directly inspired by one specific town or place. The most important thing about this book, which you probably have heard me say in another writing vlog, is that it's about a haunted hotel. And that hotel is called the Magnolia Inn. That is why this project is called Project Magnolia. The Magnolia Inn is probably not going to be in the official title, because only recently did I search that on Goodreads and realize that that is not a unique name for a hotel. There are other books out there that are already called the Magnolia Inn, but as of right now, that name is not changing. The hotel is the heart and soul of the story. I know I said the story started as a dark academia story, and you're probably wondering how the hell did a hotel get involved? I honestly could not tell you the answer to that question. So now that you finally know some actual specific details about this project and about this story, you get to watch me read through the entirety of draft 1. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. I don't think it wants to bend all the way back. This is actually my first time doing this kind of binding instead of the, I don't know what it's called, like just the traditional coil. I don't know if it's my favorite, but I think it's a little bit sturdier, which maybe this would have been a better idea if the draft was thicker, but it's okay. I really don't care too much about the specifics of how I got it printed. I just care that it's here in front of me. So this is my pencil case that I, for some reason, bring with me every day to university, even though I legitimately use the same black pen for everything. This is my trusty favorite pen. It's the Uniball Jetstream, I believe. I mean, I know it says Jetstream on the pen, but like I think that's what it's listed as. Personally, I think ballpoint pens are my favorite, and this is a bit of a more elevated ballpoint pen compared to like those Bic pens that are like $1 for a box of 20. I don't know though if I actually want to use black to write anything on the draft. That's the one benefit of my pencil case, is that I do have like several colored pens, which have I ever had to use those at school? No. I think there was like one time in a creative writing class where I was reading my friend's draft for an assignment and I wrote like a couple of comments in green pen. I do also have a lot of highlighters here. I don't really know what colors I'm feeling. Honestly, I might do the green pen because I feel like I associate green with this project. I think I might do a green pen and then a yellow mild liner. I have some good news and I have some bad news. We'll start with the bad news. I have not made much progress. I wish I was joking, but it's been over 2 hours and I have only finished chapter 3 out of 27. Specifically, that would be page 36 out of approximately 200. The reason I stopped was because I knew that I needed to film an update, but then I was hungry and I had lunch. But here's the good news. After reading the first 2 pages or so, I had to stop myself and literally say out loud, "Oh my god, this is actually good." If you've watched any of my writing vlogs of me working on this project, you would know that I really don't feel the greatest about both this draft and about the project itself. In my most recent video where I was talking about my 2026 writing goals, I basically said that I needed to read this before making a lot of my writing goals because I don't know whether or not I want to stick with this project. I will say that chapter 1 is probably going to be like one of the best chapters in this entire thing because when I was drafting chapter 1, if I remember correctly, I spent a lot of time, as every writer does, going back, rereading it, like the classic, like rewriting your first chapter like 10 times or whatever. I think that chapter 1 is probably of a higher quality than a lot of the other chapters because of the fact that I did go back and edit it as I was in the drafting phase. That's not typically how I like to write drafts. I'm a big believer that, at least for my writing process, I need to have a terrible first draft first and just get everything down on the page and not really allow myself to be critiquing my work as I go, or honestly to not even think too deeply about like any of the chapters that I wrote before the chapter that I'm currently drafting. I'm all about just getting the words on the page, just making the story exist, not thinking negatively about your work if the chapter you wrote a week ago is terrible. What I would do for a lot of my writing sessions during the month of July, which was when I had like the best time writing this, when I would sit down for a writing session, I would pretty much always read what I had written the day before. And then a big bulk of my word count that I would like produce in one day was actually me just adding additional stuff to the scene I had previously been working on. I think the first half of this book, therefore, is understandably going to have a lot more depth. The prose itself is going to be a lot stronger. The descriptions are stronger. The dialogue is stronger. One of the reasons why I thought chapter 1 was so surprisingly good was because I loved the way that I established my protagonist. The chapter was just full of lines that immediately establish who she is and immediately establish how she's really not the greatest character to be rooting for. It feels so strange to say this, but I did a good job of establishing her character and establishing the way that she sees the world and the way that she interacts with the guests that come into the hotel. In terms of taking notes and highlighting and that sort of thing, I have been taking a couple of notes on a Google Doc here on my computer in front of me. I have been taking separate notes for each chapter, which I think is what I'm going to do for the rest of the draft, but I'm predicting that some chapters are going to be like either so bad or so boring that I don't actually want to even write any notes. And then on the draft itself, I've actually just been using my trusty black pen, and I've been underlining a couple of lines and writing a couple of notes. But for the most part, I think the deeper into the draft I get, the less notes and things I'm going to be underlining, just because I'm going to get into more of a flow where I'm just trying to literally read the words on the page and just get through the story. Mostly, I've just been underlining lines that I really like, lines that I think are good sentences. Chapter 2 was terrible. Chapter 2 was in the past timeline, which I've talked about it before in a few writing vlogs, I think, at least one, when I was working on this draft, that I was sort of struggling with whether or not I wanted to do 2 timelines. In the future, it's not going to be a dual timeline book, or I don't think there's even going to be chapters set in the past. Basically, the only reason why there's chapters in the past timeline is because I thought that there was a character that was going to be really important for the present timeline. I thought that the only way I could introduce this character was through doing an entire past timeline, or at least having a few chapters that were set in the past. I'm going to be really honest, I think that character is going to get completely scrapped. I think I had an idea with that character, and I thought that it was like revolutionary when I first thought about it, but now that I've finished an entire draft of the story, and I think I have a better idea of what I want future drafts to look like, I don't think that character needs to exist, and I don't think that's like a storyline that I want to pursue. So chapter 2 was really bad. The writing was bad, the fact that it was in the past was bad, the fact that it's so obvious that I'm just trying to introduce this character, it was not good. There are some parts of it that were good because I do like the fact that it involved Anita, my protagonist, when she was like about 10 years younger. So it was interesting to see what she was like when she was younger, and then to jump into chapter 3, which is set in the present. And I actually did, in my opinion, a pretty good job of having there be a strong contrast between those 2 chapters, where you sort of start chapter 3 and then it's describing sort of what Anita is like in the present. And some of it contradicts with what her younger self was just like in chapter 2. So naturally, it makes you wonder, wow, what could possibly have happened in that past timeline that would make her so different now in the present? I can see what I was trying to do with the whole chapter 2 past timeline thing, but I know it's only going to get worse the more I read into the draft. I mean, at a certain point, they also just like stop happening because I don't need to have any more chapters in the past timeline, and then they just kind of disappear. And for like the later part of the book, it's only chapters in the present timeline. I think that's probably enough info for chapters 1 through 3. I'm now going to sit down, re-immerse myself back into the story, and I will update you when I feel like I have important things to say. It is now a little bit later. It's almost 6. The sun has gone down. I put on a sweater because I got cold. My big light is on. Basically, I'm currently about halfway through. I think actually like exactly halfway through. The book is starting to get worse. That's for sure. I'm starting to like lose connection with it a little bit because I'm reading everything and in the back of my mind, or not even the back of my mind, the front of my mind, I'm going, this is not gonna stay. Like this stuff that's happening right now, this is not the direction I want to go in anymore. This is all gonna get completely scrapped. On top of all of that, the writing is bad. It's not that I'm feeling bad about the project. If anything, I'm feeling better about the project because as I'm reading all of this stuff that I know isn't going to stay with the project, the only thing my brain can do is think about what new things I want to write. I think I can say fairly confidently right now that I'm not going to give up on this project. I think draft 2 is on the horizon. It may be far away on the horizon, but it's still there nonetheless. Overall, reading this draft is a pretty low effort task. I'll be honest, I am skimming it somewhat. I'm not reading every sentence with the same amount of focus that I would if I was reading, like, an actual novel. I also did not write this that long ago, so everything is still pretty fresh in my mind. I know what's going to happen in every single scene. Anyways, I'm not going to chat for too long because every time I stop reading this, I end up taking way too long of a break. So, we're going to get back to reading it, and I'll be honest, I might just sit down and try to read to the very end because, yeah, it's like 100 pages, but it's really not a lot for me to read. Guess who finished? Me. I am feeling a little bit exhausted because I have done pretty much nothing today other than read through this, talk to you about reading it, and edit this video. The second half of reading this definitely was, I don't want to say more of a struggle than the first half because it still wasn't really a struggle. Like, it doesn't take much brain power for me to read this, but it definitely was less of an enjoyable reading experience because the book itself was just getting worse and worse. However, I was pleasantly surprised with the actual ending. The last few chapters, things get really intense. I did not plan it out properly. I was writing it like on the fly, so some of the stuff that ends up happening at the end is just comically unbelievable or just stupid. But there are some parts about the ending that I actually think are really good and that kind of have the wheels turning right now. I think what I learned from reading this is that the beginning of the book and the end of the book were definitely the strongest parts. The middle portion to like 3/4 of the way through was probably the worst part. It's definitely far from being a publishable book, that's for sure. I'm very pleased with how the reading process ended up going, considering the fact that at the start of today, I thought that there was a very real possibility that I would finish reading this draft and then decide that I was done with this project for the time being. Instead, I am feeling the most inspired I have felt to work on this project in the last few months. If you are now sufficiently invested in this project, I highly suggest going back and watching some of my writing vlogs that I have made documenting the process of working on this book. I covered everything from the brainstorming phase to the day that I finished this draft. If you'd like, you can literally go watch me as I was writing this big chunk of text and talking about writing the midpoint or talking about how much I felt like I was pulling teeth at some points to get the words on the page. That's an exaggeration, but getting to the end of this draft was not an easy task. and I think it's really great that today I had the opportunity to read through it in its entirety and take a step back, look at it from a bird's eye view, and see that I actually did write a book. It may be short, and the fact that it's short may be very clear in the writing itself, and everything feels very rushed and chaotic, but it's undeniably a book. It's undeniably a novel. I have no doubts about that. And I think it's now undeniably a novel that I want to continue working on and make it better than it currently is. If you'd like to see where my writing journey goes next, then please subscribe. I promise there will be many more writing videos to come, including probably many more writing vlogs of me working on this project. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.